Hi, welcome to Cooking with Ali. Today we're going to learn how to cook a steak, and we're going to talk about cooking the steak process. There's a lot of details that are left out in many YouTube videos when cooking steaks, and I want to make sure that we have full transparency here and you completely understand what it takes to cook a steak. Again, most people like to cook their steaks outside on a barbecue, and that's fine and dandy, but you know, when it's raining and winter or you're back east and it's snowed in, you know, you should be able to cook a nice steak on the stove. Okay, first of all, I do like using my Logic frying pan here, this cast iron skillet. I mean, it retains the heat, it holds it in. Today we're not cooking on a gas oven. Many people do have electric, so I brought in an electric oven because stove top. So basically it makes it a lot easier for us to learn versus using a high flames of BTUs and having that gas flame. So you can learn how to adjust your heat on electric induction burner. And again, this is a nice frying pan here that's still going to retain the heat because it has a thick bottom on the bottom with the metal, so it's going to retain that heat. It's just not going to do it the same way that a cast iron is. Now again, when choosing a steak, you should be looking for a nice choice USDA steak. Now I remember 10, 20, 30 years ago, you'd be able to see a purple marking on there. That's when they'd go to the cows and mark them, and that would give you your choice and top prime steaks. Nowadays, they don't do that. Nowadays, it's very difficult to choose a steak because you don't know which is a choice and not. Now, when choosing a steak, you want to find the steak that has the most marbling. Marbling is where it's white in the middle, and the more of the white marks, the better, because that's all the fat that's going to melt into your steak. And again, because the way we're raising steaks nowadays is a little more difficult, it's very difficult for me to find a good steak at most steakhouses and making sure that they're cooked properly. And here's the reason why. The health inspector requires for us to cook everything at 40 degrees. So everything has to be chilled. Your chicken, your steak, your fish. Now, when you're putting a cold steak into a hot frying pan or a hot grill, you have issues with that because it's cold and it's searing and it's getting hot, so the temperature is not working as well. Okay, so what I like to do, and again, this is the exception to the rule, I like to leave my steak at room temperature, and this way it's going to cook evenly. So have you ever gone to a steakhouse and the steak is nice and cooked and you can see it cooked all the way on the edges, and then in the middle it's raw or not cooked evenly, and you like to see it all blend nice and pink all through the steak. So the other thing is, I don't put my steak on a plate. I don't put it on any kind of metal. I like to make sure it's paper. Even when I wrap it up at night, I fold the paper up and I like to store it in my refrigerator that way, and that's why the steak stays nice and clean and it doesn't get tarnished. Okay, the other piece is, I don't like to get fancy with steak rubs and mesquite flavors and everything. I like to keep it simple. A little salt. Okay, I want to taste the flavor of the steak and the quality, and hopefully it's there. Cracked black pepper. Okay, and you're going to season both sides, and it depends on the pepper, but I like my steak to be a little more peppery, and make sure that I rub it in. Okay, the steak likes to absorb it like a sponge, and I flip it right over. And I like using ribeye steaks because to me, ribeye steak has more flavor than anything else. New York steak is great. They're a little more tougher, but the ribeye steak has a little bit more fat. And to be honest with you, that's why we eat steaks, because of the fat. And the fat, as it melts and it cooks, it braises the steak. Sometimes, as you see, a lot of chefs add butter. We're going to add a little butter to our steak later on. But it's the fat. It's the fat that's giving it the flavor. So again, here I am. I'm rubbing it. Look at that. There you go. Okay, next we're going to stick it in the frying pan. We're going to get it nice and hot. So I'm going to turn my flame up here. Okay. And I want to sear it in a nice hot frying pan. Now, again, many of chefs have their own opinions, but this is mine. Olive oil does not have a high flash point, so people want to cook their steak in olive oil. It can burn. The oil can burn faster than other oil. So peanut oil is a great oil. If you have peanut allergies or you can't use a peanut oil is a little more expensive. I would go with a canola oil or even a vegetable oil because it has a higher flash point. And flash point means when the oil gets too hot, it can start on fire. Now we're ready to put the steak in the frying pan. But before you put the steak in the frying pan, make sure your frying pan is nice and hot. And again, that's why I put peanut oil inside my frying pan, because I don't want a flash point. But I want to make it sear the steak. You put it in, it's too cold, the frying pan is going to even get even colder, and it's going to start to steam the steak versus searing it. And the whole idea with proteins, chicken, fish, steak, you want to sear each side. That's what locks in the juices. That's what keeps those juices from running out into the frying pan. You see, as you see the smoke. You see my oil is nice and hot, and I grab my steak, and so I don't splash it. I always lift it up and drop it in the frying pan. You hear that sizzle? That's telling me the frying pan is nice and hot. And again, as I mentioned, we want to sear it. We want those juices. Now, while that's doing that, I'm going to grab a couple cloves of garlic, okay, and clean them so that as it's frying later on, we can actually take it and drop it in for a little additional flavor. I like onions with my steak, but today we're going to add a shallot, you know, and a little baby shallot here, a little baby onion, you know, the sides. And you don't need to flip it until you're ready, and it's nice and a nice dark brown on each side. Now again, each steak is going to take a little bit longer. It's not chicken. These things are really thick here. This is, see that? It's still not brown enough. I'm going to take this shallot and julienne it. Nice shallot there to add. Some nice garlic cloves. I don't need it chopped because again, this frying pan is going to be so hot. If I start to chop it, it's going to burn if I throw it in right now. So I have to look for the right time. Now again, these steaks are going to take a long time to cook. You know, the average filet mignon on a grill can take anywhere from, depending on the temperature you're looking for, I would say 10, 12, 15, 18 minutes. A lot of times, they don't just leave it on the frying pan. They're going to flip it over, sear both sides, and finish it on the oven and let it rest. Okay? Okay, so this side is seared. We're going to flip it over. See how nice and brown that is? That's locking in the flavor. Now we're going to take a few more minutes, and we're going to let it sear the other side now. Now, as you see, both sides have been seared. It's been cooking really nicely. Now, traditionally, a lot of people like to add butter to their steak. And if it turns a little brown, it's fine. You don't want to burn it. It's called noisette. And what you're going to do is just take the butter and just lightly baste your steak as it's cooking. You tilt it in and just lightly baste it. It's a nice buttery flavor. Should actually be doing it this way. It's going to give a nice flavor. Now what I want to do, okay, is I want to let my steak rest. Okay, I like my steak pretty rare. I'm going to put it right there. I'm going to turn this up a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to throw my whole garlic in there and some shallots. Actually, I want a little bit more shallots in there. I want the flavor of the onions. And I want a little bit of mushrooms in here. I like mushrooms with my steak. So you can actually finish off your steak. See that butter that's in there? You get that garlic, letting it all roast. Nice high heat here. I'm going to add a little bit of seasoning to this. A little salt, some more black pepper. throw in some thyme sprigs. Now you can add some brandy, some burgundy wine. I have a little bit of Marsala, some Madeira. Don't always have to go shopping for all your ingredients, whatever you have on hand. Again, and then I'm adding a little beef stock. Look at that. And then Madeira again, a little bit more butter. Now you can finish the steak back in there, you don't have to. And again, you let your steak rest, because if you start cutting into it right away, what ends up happening is it starts to bleed all out. Okay? Yeah, so I'm gonna turn this off now. Look at that sauce. Oh, you know, take the steak, slice it up for you. Again, my favorite steak is ribeye. Also, ribeyes with the bone in. I love to have the bone inside the steak. I'm gonna take the steak, throw it back in there. I'm gonna line it out there for you. Look at that. Look at that perfect. Look at that rareness in there. It's perfectly cooked. See that? Can you see that steak? Now, you can throw your sauce right over it. Look at that. Oh, mushrooms, onions, some fresh thymes, garlic, and shallots. Look how beautiful that steak is. Very juicy, very flavorful, and you can't get better than that. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you on our next YouTube channel, Cooking with Al. Thank you. Bye-bye.